North Shore, and every creek, river, and stream had trout, salmon in it. No, none of them do. And so can you imagine that? And I tell them that. I say, it's simple. Think of what your grandparents would think. Your great-grandparents, they'd be devastated. Atmospheric rivers, what is that, they'd say? Global fires everywhere? Snow where it's not supposed to be, and floods where it doesn't rain, and mudslides, and fires globally. Smoke out for, can you imagine that? They come out and they'll say, there's smoke here for the whole summer. Can you imagine how they'd react to that? But what it comes to is they're so disconnected, and it boggles my mind, because when we started to fight this, they said, you have to teach them our way. And our way is spirit for me and my family. The Georges is spirit. And that's our law, truth, family, health, culture. We do a lot of ceremony around all this stuff all the time. And I said, holy smokes. The elder said, teach them our way. And I said, how could I teach our way of spirit to people who don't even understand they carry spirit inside of themselves? That was Richard Kinder back then. Now it's Trudeau today. You know, like my son called him out. And he said, I'm making few choices for our future generations. And they're not. They're not. But anyway, we had a meeting with United Nations, with a rapporteur, and we're going to go that route. We're exploring The Hague and see if we could go to a higher court, where we're going to see what they could do to help us. There's like 45 rapporteurs, and we need the environmental one, we need the indigenous one, we need the fossil fuel. We need them all to get on our side and help. And we need a big microphone again to expose this joke of a process. Yeah, Emily, young girl, no charges against her ever. Lucy, started university when she was 16. Just good kid. I worked in that field helping some people in parole, and they get 20 charges against them for something, and they'd never ever see a day in jail. But when you mess with that injunction, they go to jail. All of us, all of you. That's wrong. And then look at what happened in court. That was wrong. They said, you know what, you're right, they're going to kill the orca whales. Yep, you're right, your economic analysis, the ones you did, they're right, Canada's wrong. You know what, you're right, they copied your evidence. So they agreed with you, but we're not going to look at that. We're just going to side with the best interest of Canada. When we win, we lose. And they told us that. They said, those court systems are just a branch of Canada, and who owns the pipeline? But we still have to stand up and you know, we have to be creative again. We have to be creative again, because if everyone goes and gets arrested, you know, and then you have to stay away from the pipeline and stay away from events close to the pipeline. They're methodical in what they're doing. And we have to expose it. And you know, it's funny. I just do a picture of myself in the sun smiling, and I get like a whole bunch of likes. I'm 800. Today I posted some important things, came out in the news, and I got 5 likes. You know, they mess with everything. Why not? They got all the money. But we have to be creative. We have to be creative. We have to go where they're going again, and that's what we're going to do. Remember when Trudeau tried to get on the Security Council for United Nations? Remember what they said? We're not going to let you go on there because we gave you recommendations of how you mistreat the First Nations over there. So no, you're cut off. We have to do that again. And whatever you're doing, do it too. And like this. Do it like this. Do whatever you have to do. Because I'm getting mad again, and you know, and it's frustrating. But I want to call him out again. I'm going to pray to be in that room again and call him out and make it loud again. That's you know, we know United Nations can't do anything, but it's a really loud microphone. It's the world could listen to. When we went there, when Cedar and Cannyhoose went there, they're like, this is what they do. And they're like, what? Canada? The nice little country Canada? No, they're not nice. They're abusive. The police and everybody were hurting those girls up there. You know? So we have to educate the world, and that's the part that we're going to do. We're going to go there and see how far we could go. If hopefully The Hague, that'd be really nice. Well, we'll see. We're exploring those ideas, but we're not stopping. 100%. We won some. Remember that all of us here kicked out Kinder Morgan out of our country, right? We need victories like that again. We need that again, and I believe in each and every one of you. I believe in you. You know, I'm going to relish that opportunity to do it again and stick it to them. Stick it to, again, the insurance companies, some of you guys are doing. Stick it to and Cedars is going over to the RBC AGM. Stick it to them too. Expose that. They don't care. They don't care because in the deal, if it fails or if it works, they're still going to make their money. They're the broker in between. But we have to expose them too. I know some things I think about too is I wonder if they really want to get rid of Trudeau, get those other parties. I think of that sometimes. Get those our enemies or our friends. Let them fight each other over that. $31 billion. What the hell? I don't know. I'm really angry, and it's good for me because it motivates me, and our team's motivated, and I know you are too. But thank you for doing this. I'm happy you do this. I'm happy you do this. I love what you do. I got to visit you and talk to you up on Burnaby Mountain and really know your art and know your soul that's put into it. You know, and this is the bright stuff for me. You know, even the songs, I like your songs too. I was enjoying your songs there.
Thank you.
You're welcome. But this is part of it. Because those songs, when you sing, this is what I believe. You put how we smudge and how we do ceremonies. Doesn't matter what it is. Every ceremony I've been to around the world is fire, earth, water, and sky. That's what it is. Every single culture and spirituality, they do that. And some use incense, candles, we use smudge. But something represents each of those things. And when you sing, that's connected with that air spirit, and you build up your spirit by singing those songs. I believe that. And you know, in our ceremonial artifacts, you know, and some are artistic. And, you know, you think you take a tree and you kill it and then you carve something. No, you take it and you put life back into it and metamorphose into what it is. And that's what this could be too. A spirit. That's what I really believe. And that's what we have. That's what we have. And that's what separates us from them. Because look at them, spiritless people. All the work you do to include those songs, to include the art, and protect what we love, with the lands and the waters and everything that's a part of it. Even them being dysfunctional. I like telling them that. Trudeau, or back then Kinder Morgan, say, you're too dysfunctional to take care of your future generations. Remember, we always say this. But because you're like that, you're still part of the human race. We'll do it for you. We'll do it for you because you're too dysfunctional to see that you're ruining everything. Everything that we love. Everything that you should love and that you need to survive yourself. That's what we'll do. So anyway, my hand's up to you, brother, for your beautiful art.
Thank you.
This beautiful night and this beautiful event. All these beautiful people. Many, many blessings to you. And damn it, we're going to fucking stop that damn pipeline still, you know? So thank you.
My name is Ian Angus, and from the Institute of the Humanities at SFU. The people at the back, there's some seats over here on this side. Please come in. And then these other people maybe squash over a little bit for you. We want to get everybody in. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we're on the unceded and traditional territories of the Coast Salish people. You're in. Excuse me for just 1 second. Okay, well, I next want to just spend a couple of moments. I'm not going to do fancy introductions of everybody. Everybody who's coming here has done a lot of things and many useful things. George Rammell, who has made this monstrosity behind me, was born in Cranbrook in BC. He's been a practicing artist in this territory for many long years and practiced with Bill Reid, amongst others, and has in recent years got into a big kerfluffle with Capilano University for shutting down the art program, and they destroyed one of his pieces of political art, satirizing the president up there. So he's recently turned his talents towards doing political art for the anti-TMX struggle. And so we're very pleased to make this part of this piece of unveiling as part of that struggle. George Rammell.
Well, I just want Rueben George to come up here and pull off that veil.
You can pull it from that direction. Okay, tell me when. Yank it off. Tell me when. Yeah. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now.
Broke Ken's injunction that protects Trans Mountain Pipeline. You can't break Ken's injunction.
There's hundreds of you, but you're all guilty. This won't take long. Remember, I'm right, you're wrong. Climate collapse isn't a virtual certainty. It's just foreseeable or likely. There's a contingency. Remember, social measures may prevent a dire outcome. You broke my injunction. You can't break my injunction.
Will George, how would you like it if someone parked in your driveway?
You've been parked in our driveway for 150 years.
Where did that Tsleil-Waututh live anyway? Does anybody know? You can't break Ken's injunction. You can't break our injunction.
What's this, young man? You say time immemorial? What does that mean, time immemorial? David and Jennifer, there's no air of reality to your claims. The contingency might save us. I don't need to look at your evidence or hear from your climate expert witnesses. You can't break my injunction. You can't break my injunction. Keep our arms locked together so they can't drag us away. David and Jennifer, you could have chosen to do nothing and let the process unfold. As unpalatable as that may seem to you. I will not allow your evidence or your expert witnesses in this court.
But we have no alternative through politics or law.
21 days for you. Take them away. There, that'll keep them quiet.
They're not scared of us. We need to raise the stakes. Cut the 5-step warnings and add big fines. Your environmental concerns are of no concern to this court. I'm not a scientist, I'm a judge. And I conclude your views are entrenched. Emily Kelsel, you and your friend Maya broke Ken's injunction.
But if we do nothing, we suffer from eco-anxiety.
Eco-anxiety? Is that a real word? Eco-anxiety? Order! 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 It's off to the Alouette Women's Correctional Center for you! Take her away!
You hot-headed, limp-wristed, petulant fool! You small-minded, microscopic, mental tool! Defending the undefendable, promoting the perverted, twisted tirades where you use what is worded in law to uphold the will of oppressors. You quash all resistance to your murderous measures. We fight and we love and we burn because we care. You are the evil you spare to impair.
Take her away!
Good, and I'm glad, and I'll do it again. You don't scare me, just beauty and friends. This system is twisted. Why try and pretend I'd lay down my life for this pipeline to end?
Take her away! That's what you get for breaking Ken's injunction. You all broke Ken's injunction.
Well, there you have it. Well, it's such an honor to have Rueben George pull the veil off this piece. It adds a lot of credibility. It was great having the solidarity notes here with Earl Peach. I just love his pieces. I just love that community that he builds, regardless of what we do. You know, it doesn't matter what our skill sets are. This movement needs everything. Minister Barry Morris, I was brainstorming trying to find a site for this, you know, and when I first thought of the church here, because, you know, Barry was arrested, he's been holding meetings here with Jim for years, Jim Leiden, and Nancy suggested this is the perfect place because churches are a place of refuge and sanctuary in times of war, and it just seems appropriate somehow. I've got to thank the BC Arts Council because they financed this project. I would never have been able to do it without their funding. And you know, it's interesting. I think I got it because Quetzal Tattle, a Stolo matriarch, wrote a really powerful letter of support for me. And Gujal, Chief Skadans of Haida Gwaii, he wrote a really powerful letter. He actually said it would be a good investment. And when I first sent my artist statement to Ian, writer, philosopher, and dear friend Ian Angus, he immediately responded, "We've got to do something." So here we are. And of course, Tim Takaro made sure that we maximize the exposure for this piece. Tim works like crazy at this stuff. It's incredible. You know, when I think of Tim, I think of him I think of him providing seminars, educational seminars to the world from his laptop way up in a cottonwood tree above Burdett Creek. And I think, oh my God, what a powerful resistance that is. Ecologist Christine Thuring. Hold on. Christine has been working like Tim behind the scenes to maximize the exposure for this. And she is very qualified to be the voice of Fitzpatrick. Yeah, it was great. Very informed. David Gooderham and Jennifer Nathan are here, and they are my mentors in terms of really understanding the science and politics of what's really going on here. You know, and well, I mean, it's complicated. There's so many layers to it. But you know, David is such a powerful lawyer because he's also an artist, and he thinks outside the box. He really does think differently than a lot of lawyers because he's so creative and his blogs are amazing. Go to Gooderham Nathan and you'll see a huge collection of essays and years of research that the judges are terrified of. Nancy has been so supportive all the way through this. My wife, she did all the sewing. She sewed all the gowns. You know, beautiful job. and Nancy did all the. I'm a dinosaur, digitally. You know, I guess that's why she handed me this. But you know, the thing is, she put this essay together for me. That it was with photos and everything. She's a genius. You know. She's an artist too. And my son Coulter coached me on welding techniques to keep me going. And halfway through the job, our TIG welder broke down, and he put a new solenoid switch in for me, kept me going. It was amazing. You know. Alex Phillips is here, artist, educator, writer, Alex Phillips. She has arranged an exhibition for this piece for 2 weeks in June at the Emily Carr. So I'd like Tim to speak now.
Thanks, George. I just wanted to thank everyone for coming and also thank a lot of people behind the scenes that made this happen. The Protect the Planet media team, Lucas and Elwyn, thank you very much for the video. Renee Desro and Mark Jacobs, who were our strong men this morning. I also really want to thank Mary Armakelian, who arranged for the streaming. So there are many more people able to see this tonight, thanks to Mary's work. And again, the Protect the Planet media team getting the word out. So it takes a lot of people to make something like this happen, and they all deserve to be thought of and remembered.
You know, I'd like to say, if I was really wealthy and wanted to do something, I would channel money to like Raven, you know, respecting Aboriginal values and environmental needs, and I'd give some money to Protect the Planet. There's so many groups, you know, but I would also, you know, invest in some young people because they can motivate other young people, and you know, when I think of like the Braided Warriors or Zane Hack or Emily Kilsaw. I mean, these are young people that really have the capacity to mobilize in a really massive way for the kids that are scared about their future. And, you know, providing them with a piece of plastic to just buy what they need to keep going on this inertia would be so valuable. You know, how much are they going to spend as coffee money to some people? You know, Emily might go out and buy 100 T-Rex outfits. You know, the last thing Justin Trudeau's going to want is to see a herd of T-Rexes coming down the road towards him, you know. And her determination reminds me of of Helen Caldicott. You know, for those of you that are old enough to remember, she took on the nuclear proliferation resistance in the States in the 70s. If you're younger, you might want to look up the video, If You Love This Planet. You know, you'll see what I mean by determination. You know, when Emily put on her hood and growled at Fitzpatrick in court, I think there was a turning point in the public consciousness. I think that the public suddenly realized, wow, like, that's what it's down. Like, really? They're jailing our youth for telling the truth about climate change? Is that really how, what, you know, I mean, it's ridiculous what's going on. I think, I mean, I think she needs to be removed from the bench, period. I mean, I'm quoting David Gooderham here, but, you know, her courtroom is ugly. You know, she treats Indigenous people like they don't possess their own agency. And her courtroom is a colonial environment where she's just pushing dispossession. You know, you feel like you're in the 1930s in her courtroom. It's embarrassing, it's ugly, it's racist. And she is not fit to be on the bench. Right? You know, you often wonder how judges get coronated to be judges. Like, how did this guy get to be a Supreme Court judge? I've been thinking, I always thought they were superior human beings with a real insight in the world, right? Philosophers. His role in life, his role in life was to be a lawyer for big tobacco. That's his history. Yeah. I beg your pardon. It's true. You defended big tobacco for years. I did not. You did too. You know, let's take a look at this sculpture. You know, like, okay, we have the crown at the top. You know, it's covered in jewels from all over the Commonwealth. Okay, and then we've got the fur trade. Oh, it's interesting. The Beavers are holding a ceaseless recruiting banner. You know, you can get a job as a spy. You know, a Canadian spy agency would love you to work for them. You can spy on Indigenous elders and their allies. You know. Okay, we have the lion. He's got the crown on his butt. But wait a minute. That's not his arm. Nancy noticed that that's actually Justin's arm. And he's holding a halo that says, "Ignore Indigenous law." Whoa. And there's a drop of oil with light coming from above to the judge's head. Okay? You know, in 1982, his dad brought the Constitution home. And along with that came a responsibility for Canada to treat First Nations fairly. You know why the actual Canadian coat of arms has a unicorn on it? That's a symbol of Scotland. And the reason it's in chains is because Britain took it by force in the late 14th century. That coat of arms, which Bill Reid always said the coat of arms was like the closest thing to a totem in that it speaks to your ancestry, right? Okay, British ancestry, okay? It's British ancestry. It's time to retire it, but the fact that this is a symbol of conquest, that's what these judges are working under. That's the mindset that they're focused on, right? They've got blinders on. They have such a limited worldview because that's all they know. It's like the world monetary system coming down from above. They're working under that. I drew them in court. They're literally under that symbol of conquest.
Who's the man from Glad?
Okay, this is Chief Justice Robert Bauman, whose lips conveyed judicial buffoonery of a historic scale. When he actually told David Gooderham, after he told him he was going to ignore all his evidence and his scientific witnesses, that you could have chosen to do nothing and let the process unfold. The process he's referring to is a planet that's 3 degrees warmer than pre-industrial levels by the end of the century. But you have a responsibility to be a good Canadian and do nothing. As unpalatable as it may seem to you. You know, that quote from that man is a violation of Indigenous rights of all their allies that are fighting on their behalf. It's important she get dragged off the bench, but it's also important to look at the much bigger picture. And the much bigger picture is the myopic worldview these judges have. I mean, why aren't we drawing from the humanities for judges? It boggles my mind. The whole thing is a gong show. I mean, you people have been to court, you've done jail time, you know what a gong show is and how they keep changing the rules as they go along. You know, when Jim Leiden and Stacey Gallagher were arrested for defending the Tsleil-Waututh, you know, because of what do they call it? Consent. The Federal Court of Appeal actually came to the same conclusion a few days later. Okay, so why aren't these judges apologizing to these men? They should be given retribution for their damages. But these judges won't apologize for that. You know, I mean, the second round of consultation was just as much of a gong show as the first one. You know, it was all fluff. Oh, by the way, I made 2 Justins. If Nancy and I are over on Gambier and I'm not around and you see on the news he's growing his beard back, this just clicks in from behind. And by the way, for anybody that has been arrested and fined or you're planning to, I want you to have some fun to come back here, take a look at the back of the piece later. You'll see where all the pulls are. There's the jaw pulls, there's the arm pulls, there's the head, and I want you to have some fun. Okay, because it's very therapeutic. That's what Gujau said. If you're not having a good time, you're not going to win.
You say power, people.
Excuse
say
me.
idle, you say no more. Idle. No more. Idle. No more. I say land, you say back. Land. Back. Land. Back. I say Tarzan, you say end it. Tarzan. End it. Tarzan. End it. I say pipeline, you say not it. Pipeline. Not it. Pipeline. Not it. I say water, you say pure water. Pure water. Pure. I say air, you say breathe. Air. Breathe. Air. Breathe. I say orca, you say sing. Orca. Sing. Orca. Sing. I say salmon, you say sacred. Salmon. Sacred. Salmon. Sacred. I say ocean, you say life. Ocean. Life. Ocean. Life. I say old growth, you say stand tall. Old growth. Stand tall. Old growth. Stand tall. I say children, you say future. Children. Future. Children. Future. I say mother, you say earth. Mother. Earth. Mother. Earth. I say planet, you say power. Planet. Power. Planet. Power. I say people, you say power. People. Power. People. Power. People. Power. People.
Thank you.
Thanks, Don. Woo! So we're gonna have a panel now.
Yeah, this is gonna be
And while we're getting that set up, I just wanted to acknowledge the narrative arc that this is part of. And
Many people have been contributing to this awareness piece. The state of our colonial judicial system that we've inherited, which is so outdated, it clearly needs work. But I just wanted to acknowledge, so obviously the work of Gooderham and Nathan. David was recently on a roundtable at UBC talking about injunction culture. That video is still available for seeing. There was also a webinar about dismantling the SERG, and that was through Peace Brigade International. SERG, who wants to say it?
Community Industry Response Group.
Right. We want to talk about waste of money, let us speak no more.
Capitalist Industry Response Group.
Right, Capitalist Industry Response Group. Also wanted to just shout out to another work in progress, which will hopefully hit the bookshop soon, which is Rosemary and Adrian's anthology of TMX arrests on the mountain. What's it called? Go Tell It on the Mountain? Just tell it. Tell it on the mountain. And also, I'm so pleased, I think Kara from Indigenews is here. They've been doing really great work on exposing just the colonial toxicity of, especially coming out of Stone Cold Shelley, as we affectionately refer to her. Yeah, so big up to Indigenews, and also I'm so grateful too. I wrote an opinion editorial that was published today called The Weaponization of the Courts and Why We Should All Be Concerned. So, yeah. Thank you. So thanks to everyone for being here and for everything that each of us does. Let's move into the panel.
It is our hope that we can have a conversation, including many of the people here today. We're quite well aware that many of you have a lot of experience and a lot of thought about these matters as well. But we have a few people that we've asked to come and make some fairly short remarks at the beginning to just get the conversation started. So Michelle Silongan, if you would come up here, please. Alex Phillips and Rueben George, you want to come up and sit here, or not? Okay. If you would come up and just sit here, and I'll introduce you while you're doing that. Alex Phillips here is a sculptor, writer, and associate professor at Emily Carr University, where she teaches visual art and anthropology. A former student of George Rammell's at Capilano University, she protested the art program's illegal closure by the President and Board of Governors. Alex continues the fight for social justice and accessible education as chair of the Human Rights and International Solidarity Committee of the Federation of Post-Secondary Educators. which represents 10,000 college and university teachers. And at the far end, at the far end of the table, Michelle Silongan is a lawyer practicing in criminal defense and civil litigation on the territories of the Kwantlen, Musqueam, Katsi, Semiahmoo, Tsawwassen, Clayoquot, and Coquitlam peoples. The majority of her clients are Indigenous and environmental activists being prosecuted on criminal charges or for contempt of court, including at TMX and Fairy Creek. And she is currently counsel for both conviction and sentencing TMX appeals before the BC Court of Appeal. Michelle is also a steering committee member for the Law Union of BC and a member of the Movement Legal Support Subcommittee, which provides legal support and know your rights training to activists, and a director of the Association of Legal Aid Lawyers. And Rueben George, whom you heard before, is of the Tsleil-Waututh Nation and an Indigenous community organizer and spiritual leader. He's a Sundance chief and has worked across Canada and the United States facilitating workshops in healing and wellness. In his present position as Director of Community Development for the Tsleil-Waututh Nation, Rueben oversees the education, social services, employment and training, youth and elders programs, family support programs, and the Tsleil-Waututh Nation Daycare and Early Childhood Learning Center. So we'll have some opening remarks to stimulate your thinking. We'll go first Alex Phillips, then Michelle Silongan, and then Rueben George.
Thanks, Ian. I think we've got to get the lights adjusted so people can see the slides.
The lights need to come down.
These ones.
They go up.
That one's got to go up.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go.
Okay, thank you. Well, this is not my normal art history lecture venue, but it's great to see you all here anyway. Is that good? Okay. Nice to meet you, Michelle. Nice to meet you. Okay, can I start? By way of placing George's piece in context, I've been asked to say a few words about protest art and its effectiveness as an agent of social change. My first observation is that in an economy driven by consumption, in which everybody is conditioned from birth to buy, the very act of making a thing of the hand and heart is an act of protest. Stepping outside the cycle of consumerism to communicate to one's fellow human being through the vehicle of art, be it music, performance, painting, or sculpture, is an act of resistance. Now, George's work follows in a long and storied tradition. Here's an image from a work he did satirizing the former president of Capilano College, Nurse Bullcroft. She who destroyed Cap's art program unilaterally while taking her pet poodle to work. It's linked to the scathing early 19th century caricatures of the legal profession by Honoré Daumier. Some of you may have noticed these in the lawyer's office you've likely visited in your struggles against TMX. From the same period, we also have Theodore Géricault's painting Raft of the Medusa, which showed the 15 survivors of the wreck of the French frigate Méduse, which ran aground off the coast of Mauritania. The disaster caused a scandal as it pointed to the incompetence of the royalist-appointed French captain who abandoned the raft and its occupants after a few miles of towing it. In the 13 days before their rescue, the desperate survivors resorted to murder, suicide by drowning, and cannibalism. The incident became a huge scandal for the recently restored French monarchy. Because its cargo contained slaves destined for Europe, the painting also became an icon of the abolitionist movement. You might notice that the figure at its apex is a black man, painted from a Haitian model named Joseph. The picture so enraged the French government that it refused to purchase it, although it had won a gold medal at the Paris Salon where it first appeared. It might also surprise you to learn that this neoclassical painting by Jacques-Louis David, better known for Napoleon on his horse, this painting is called The Oath of the Horatii. It depicts an ancient Greek scene of allegiance swearing. It helped ignite the French Revolution by encouraging illegal republican sentiments in an era when loyalty to the monarchy was law. George's work also links with the ancient tradition of carnival, where once a year the streets of Europe were filled with massive puppets of the rich and powerful, while little boys paraded around town as kings for a day, and donkeys wore bishop's robes and held mass. In Europe, those at the top of the social heap expected ridicule was the price of power, but thin-skinned Canadian worthies allow no such leeway for an occasional laugh at their expense. One of the legacies of colonialism is always having to say you're sorry, or it's off to the slammer for wearing a dinosaur suit, or should I say, a sorry sir suit to the sit-in. In contemporary times, artists have used art to disrupt the status quo by numerous means. In the midst of the Vietnam War, when US bombs were killing thousands of Vietnamese peasants every year, Yoko Ono performed Cut Piece. As this tiny Asian woman artist sat motionless, audience members were invited to take a pair of scissors and cut pieces of her clothing off her until she was nearly naked. Likewise, in 1973, Chris Burden performed 747 by firing a pistol at a passing Boeing 747. Both these works take the subjective role of the victim. Women artists in the 1970s made work that challenged gender roles and the role of art itself in sometimes shocking and previously unimaginable ways. In interior scroll, for example, Carolee Schneemann read a text offering a feminist critique of a male filmmaker's work, which she carefully pulled while naked from her vagina. Yeah. For her part, Barbara Kruger deployed Soviet-era style posters that critiqued power relations from the battlefields of women's bodies to the tyranny of consumerism. And then there were the one-sentence aphorisms of Jenny Holzer, who observed from T-shirts and the electronic billboard in Times Square that the abuse of power comes as no surprise. Holzer also invited us to consider that it's private property that creates crime. While art can't pass motions apportioning a greater share of civic budgets to housing the homeless, it can give visibility to causes that would otherwise go unnoticed. Some of you will remember the days when the AIDS epidemic was a secret death sentence confined to the community of sufferers, largely gay men, and their immediate families. That was until they began building the AIDS quilt. Suddenly, this massive collaborative art project that stretched over several football fields made visible the enormity of the crisis, helping to spur public officials in Reagan-dominated Washington, as well as private donors, to find a treatment. One of my favorite works of protest art was done by the Russian group Voynia. Under cover of darkness, they painted a giant red penis on the road running over a bridge in Moscow. By day, when the bridge was raised to let ships pass through, the penis stood straight up in full, defiant view of KGB headquarters across the street. The dream of a fossil fuel-free world likewise got a boost when the bike-riding dinosaurs pedaled around the streets of a major city. Okay, sorry. During Trump's administration, Mexicans made their feelings known by burning him in effigy. Yes, and the dream of a fossil fuel-free world likewise got a boost when bike-riding dinosaurs pedaled around the streets of a major city. And just recently, Ukraine's supporters humiliated Moscow's London embassy staff by pouring hundreds of liters of blue and yellow paint on the street in front of it. And to return to feminist action, Pussy Riot recently performed Putin's Ashes. So although it can't legislate guaranteed incomes or settle land claims, art in the service of protest is pretty good at treating and creating common cause among activists and making everyone feel better when rubber and rhetorical bullets are flying. In closing, you may be interested in knowing that George and I share an interesting history. In 1990, I walked into his classroom at Capilano College, now Capilano University, wanting to learn something about sculpture, having spent 10 years as a courtroom illustrator for CTV and CBC News. Little did I know that I'd stumbled into the studio of one of Canada's most accomplished artists. 3 years later, I went on to get a degree at the University of Washington and then a teaching position at Emily Carr, where I've been since. As a courtroom illustrator, I drew hundreds of judges, and not all of those drawings were flattering. But now it's George who's doing the courtroom illustrating and me who's doing the teaching. So sitting in front of this work, I feel we've come full circle. The sculptor's student has returned to pay tribute to the teacher's masterpiece of judicial satire. Thank you, George, for employing your exceptional talent to give us all a little comic relief from some of the dinosaurs who populate our courts.
Oh, great presentation's up. Hello again, my name is Michelle Silongan. I am a criminal defense lawyer. I assist a lot of activists while they're waiting to go before the court and providing a little bit of information about what the court process is like and hopefully being able to demystify the process so that if they're in a situation where they do plan on being arrested, they can perhaps have a fuller picture of what that process is like, what the consequences are, and be informed and make that decision before they step forward. I think it's really important to have that kind of context so that maybe not defang the court a little bit, but again have that sense of control and knowing what you're going into. So thanks for the opportunity to speak to you all today. I have a bit of a wordy presentation about criminal contempt of court. Can go to the next slide, please. So I am a lawyer, so I will say that there's a disclaimer that this information provided in the presentation does not and is not intended to constitute legal advice. It's that all information, content, materials available on this are for general information purposes only. My hope with this presentation is to, again, provide some of the language that the courts use while discussing contempt of court and other civil disobedience actions. As a lawyer, I do think that there is value to learning and recognizing their language when navigating through the court and the prosecutorial process. And from a tactical perspective, understanding how institutions understand themselves and their roles, and how that can impact or not impact the language you decide to use for your own advocacy, and if it isn't your intention to allow for more of a dialogue. So next slide, please. So, people who've been arrested, people who are thinking about being arrested, the question is, as a political act, what are you hoping to accomplish through the court process? Are you looking for a win? Are you looking for something to be overturned? Are you looking for your Perry Mason moment where you look the court and the judge in the eye and they fall to their knees and cry and understand? Are you trying to convince the judge of the irreversible damage of the pipeline? What do you think you can accomplish through the court systems that you otherwise couldn't? Or ultimately, is it a platform to speak your voice in expectance of a predetermined outcome? Next slide. So this is when I'm going to go into lawyer hat mode, and it's a slide here about how courts define and establish criminal contempt of court. It is very wordy, so maybe just hands up the people who can actually read what's on the slide. Okay, so on the left, it asks, what does the TMX injunction prevent people from doing, per Affleck's order? Quote, physically obstructing, impeding, or otherwise preventing access by Trans Mountain, its contractors, employees, or agents to or work in any of the sites or work areas. The legal elements that are needed to prove contempt of court. And this is interesting because if you're thinking of someone who has a goal of obtaining an acquittal for an arrest, acquittals come from the prosecution not being able to prove to court the essential elements of criminal contempt of court. So, anybody here who was arrested at Fairy Creek? Have your matters already been dealt with, or are they in a holding pattern? Dealt with already? Okay, so we had a really recent decision. It's called the Henderson decision. And what the consequences of those are for people who haven't already had their matters dealt with through the courts, and who did not have an injunction read out to them, which unfortunately means the people who arrested Trans Mountain, but not the people at Fairy Creek. Because what happened in that decision through Justice Thompson was, instead of reading the injunction, the police read a short, like a little short warning for people, essentially saying that, you're blockading the pipeline. If you walk away, basically, you're blocking the pipeline. That's against the order. That's bad. You're going to be arrested for contempt of court. And what Justice Thompson eventually decided in his decision, and this is why I put on the left what the TMX injunction prevents people from doing, is essentially the police were seen as it's not giving people adequate understanding of what they were impeded from doing. So there is an example at Fairy Creek of an Indigenous person walking back and forth carrying a drum and playing on the drum. And the police arrested him. But it was argued successfully that that act that he wasn't doing didn't constitute a blockade. He was mobile, he was active, he was moving. So he was not found guilty of criminal contempt of court. So again, that's why I've provided the elements here needed to prove to contempt of court, because if your goal is an acquittal, if Crown cannot prove these legal elements, they don't have contempt of court made out. So you haven't committed contempt of court. So the order must state directly what shall or shall not be done. The person alleged to have breached the order must have had actual knowledge of it. And the person alleged to have breached the order must have intentionally done the act the order prohibits or intentionally failed to do the act the order compels. There's a lot of discussion about what's the difference between civil and criminal contempt of court. And when I talk to the many, many people who I end up being on the arrest support hotline for, a lot of people are just really scared of what the word criminalization entails and what it represents. They are, genuine salt of the earth, law-abiding people who have never had a speeding ticket. And all of a sudden, by act of their principles, they find themselves on the other end of a line that they never really thought that they would be on the end of the line of. And maybe, maybe that is an element of privilege, because when you think of a lot of people, on the downtown east side who have their day-to-day lives criminalized in a certain way, don't hang out in a certain area, don't spend too long in this area, maybe I would just kind of ask people to, think about what the stigma of criminalization is. It's not always fair, Maybe before you ever came to this world, you saw people who were arrested, people who were convicted of crimes a certain way. But, that unfairness in the process has impacted a lot of people, unfortunately, before all of this ever happened. So that's just something I wanted to put in mind. Anyways. Yeah. So people kind of steel themselves when they hear the word criminal contempt of court. Criminal, bad, criminal code, criminal charges, criminal record. Things which are disastrous on the lives of people sometimes. And has someone been arrested for an Extinction Rebellion or a Save Old Growth action? Okay. A suspended sentence? Has someone gotten a suspended sentence for their arrest? Yes. So unfortunately, people here who have suspended sentences have experienced something which a TMX arrestee or a Fairy Creek arrestee won't have. And that is something on their criminal record. And that is something that follows them in a way that, contempt arrests don't always have. So anyways, criminal contempt of court. How does that differentiate itself from civil contempt of court? Our firm deals with civil contempt of court, but usually what that means is someone refuses to remove the illegal dwelling that they have on their property. And that usually for the courts is what constitutes civil contempt. Criminal contempt is proof that the defiance or disobedience was carried out in a public way, and the intent, knowledge, or recklessness as to the fact that the public disobedience would tend to depreciate the court's authority. Think of that how you will. But the Supreme Court said that public defiance is something that transcends the limits of any dispute between particular litigants. which is, is the cause that you're getting yourself arrested for, simply a private dispute between two private parties? Or is it something that is supposed to carry more weight or carry more bearing and carry more relevance? And that broader element of that contempt of court is unfortunately what makes it criminal. So maybe that's the theme of this presentation right here. Next slide. Man, I feel like I'm being such a downer here. So just really quickly, where do courts get their power to prosecute contempt for contempt of court? Criminal contempt, including civil contempt, is not found in the criminal code, and it's the only surviving common law criminal offense, which means that it's developed entirely by the court and not through statute. So you can't see it because it's kind of in the corner on the right-hand side. But basically, it's a quote from one of the Trans Mountain Pipeline decisions. And it quotes Chief Justice Lemaire and McMillan Blodell, which says that while it is indeed possible to conceive of a system where all contempt powers are transformed into codified offenses, such a system will be antithetical to ours, where the Supreme Court of General Jurisdiction plays a general role. The point of this is that the courts are really firm that they want this power to remain within the courts and not something that goes through parliament or democratic processes or the legislature. And I think that that is, something important. Next slide. Yes. So why are courts particularly sensitive to contempt matters versus other offenses? Oh, no. Okay. Because, the courts deal with really serious offenses. Not like criminal offenses. People do really shitty things to each other. So that's the kind of stuff that is usually the bread and butter of what goes through the provincial court. But what's pink in there? I don't know how much of that. So these aren't my words, okay? This isn't what I'm really trying to, but this is what the court says. And it is, public defiance of a court order threatens the rule of law, which is not a guaranteed feature of Canadian life. It needs constant vigilance to be sustained. It is not only judges who have that obligation. It is incumbent upon all members of society. Similarly, the law applies to everyone. No one is entitled to pick and choose the laws or the court orders they will obey because they believe they have a higher obligation. If they choose to do so and offer public defiance of a court order, the judges of this court have a duty to respond to that defiance. It's not me, okay? I didn't write this. I'm just a defense lawyer. The rule of law is directly dependent on the ability of the courts to enforce their processes and maintain their dignity and respect. Next slide. Okay. So this set of lines are actually from XRRS. Because a lot of people have this idea of, civil disobedience, and it's an important thing, and that's what affects social change. And then in your presentation, it shows how, art and public defiance and being in places where you're not supposed to be is what instills and inspires people and plants that seed for people who are just passersby and would not otherwise have been confronted with these issues, and encourages to see things in a new way. So how do courts treat civil disobedience? Civil disobedience is a time-honored measure of communicative action to correct perceived injustices and to right wrongs. Citizens who care deeply and passionately about social justice issues have been real agents, or agents of real and transformative change in the course of human history. Racial and gender equality started with acts of civil disobedience. The suffragette movement for women's right to vote was one form of civil disobedience. The civil rights movement for racial equality in the States, and the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa, the gay marriage movement, and other social justice movements are but a few among many examples where civil disobedience has been used to affect change. So that sounds great, right? Like, courts, you're cool with civil disobedience? Okay.
Like my mom. I was like, I taught you to stand up for yourself, except
We could talk about that after the presentation where those videos aren't there. Work for life. Yeah, so kind of preaching to the converted here. But essentially, so what makes these civil disobedience acts attract the disapproval of the courts, and how they will kind of differentiate the noble things of civil disobedience actions of the civil rights movements is they'll say, for the instance of Extinction Rebellion and Save on Growth and British Warrior Solidarity, that the act of mischief or the law of mischief is itself not an unfair law. And there's nothing inherently wrong about the law of mischief. So if you were creating civil disobedience and you're being prosecuted for mischief, but it's not the law of mischief that you're protesting against, so then that's a bad. Is that in the slide there? Next slide, please, sorry. Okay, yeah. Therefore, where a protest devolves to civil disobedience which adversely impairs or impacts other citizens in their right of lawful and peaceful movement and their use and enjoyment of public property, there must be accountability in the criminal justice system. And here, the adoption of civil disobedience methods and the promotion of a just cause does not transform illegal actions into legal ones. Sorry. Next slide. Okay, don't worry, I'm reaching the end here. So, examples of unsuccessful arguments at Trans Mountain trials are on appeal, and again, not for lack of trying. And the first one is, sorry, I think you're like, no, because I know that sometimes, I'm gonna say collateral secondary attack, and people are gonna be, it's a not a popular word here. But, so for the courts, generally challenging the merits or the legitimacy of the injunction itself is not going to be a successful argument for the prosecution of contempt of court, because again, they will say that it's an impermissible collateral or secondary attack, and that if it's not in an application to vary or set aside the injunction itself, and it's instead brought up in a proceeding for contempt of court, it's not a defense that the court is going to accept. Because if they say, well, if you dispute the legality or legitimacy of why this order was there, or if it's no longer relevant, then it's your job to put that in an application to vary set aside the injunction. So unfortunately, the court doesn't see prosecution for contempt of court as the venue to advance these kinds of arguments. Other unsuccessful arguments were that arrestees did not intend to obstruct a particular person or vehicle or intend to obstruct all access to the terminal. They believed that the injunction precluded them from exercising free speech as protected in the charter, that the previous Federal Court of Appeal decision had already quashed the NEB approval of the pipeline expansion. And the last one is defense of necessity. Next slide.
What about the judge being racist?
Not in a criminal contempt of court proceeding. So sorry. So I think that the law in defense of necessity, and I am part of a lot of defense lawyer groups where they kind of talk about when the next opportunity to argue defense of necessity is going to be. You know, some people are of the mind that it's a holding pattern to see if there's other courts in Canada that are, you know, going to offer more fertile ground, because unfortunately what we have with Trans Mountain is not fertile ground for defense of necessity. So unfortunately it is a bit of a developing thing, because the way that the courts work now is that to be involuntary within the meaning of necessity defense, the wrongful act must be inevitable, unavoidable, and afford no reasonable opportunity for an alternative course of action that does not involve a breach of the law. So, fortunately, it's a really uphill battle, and you know, people who have a lot of more experience than me in terms of navigating the colonial court systems, we're still trying to scratch our heads about when the next juncture of this is going to be. And next slide. You know, this is the theme of this art piece, but the court will respond that alternatives to breaching the injunction exist, and there's a meaty paragraph which kind of explains how you did it bad. Next slide. Oh, sorry, was that it? Okay, that's all right. You didn't have to live through that much longer of that. The last slide was basically deference by the courts to democratic discourse. And this happens in a lot of litigations that deal with these kinds of issues. So the quote here from another Trans Mountain Pipeline decision is, do I need to subject you all to this? Lastly, I will observe that what seems to have been forgotten is the excuse of necessity is argued in this instance that we live in a robust democracy. Governments change their policy when public pressure is brought to bear, and governments themselves not infrequently leave office following elections, and therefore policies of one kind or another change. Okay. So anyways, so the last slide is, where does that leave us? So hopefully this bit of a whirlwind tour in terms of how courts understand themselves has maybe given you a bit of an insight to next time you are facing them or having to deal with that, to again understand how courts understand themselves, and then, you know, depending on what your intention is through the court system, you know, how to better have a dialogue, or alternatively, know what they're going to come at you so you know how to respond more effectively. So those are my comments. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. That was good. Made me think of our court. It was 11 years ago. It was the national. I think it was the National Energy. Back then, it was the National Energy Board hearings, and they gave us 40 minutes. And 40 minutes to go over our 1,200-page assessment. And you know, we brought in world-renowned scientists and economists and experts and spill analysis, and all that stuff. We looked at our claim to our land. Uncle N had the foresight years ago to map out all of our traditional territory. I was a teenager when we did that, and I think it was in the late 90s, and they said, where did you fish? Where did you go? Where did you go camp or hang out and do things in our traditional territory? I mapped out on a big map of our traditional territory about maybe 200 places. But I remember my Uncle Bob, when he mapped it out, he mapped out that Robson Street was a hunting trail for deer. And so we used all that evidence and created our assessment, saying, this is what's going to happen here, and this is and then, you know, it turned into our referral process. So anyone building in Tsleil-Waututh territory needs a Tsleil-Waututh Nation permit. Not your houses and stuff, but bigger projects. So we deal with about 500 a year. We give out 500 permits a year, and of course, Kinder Morgan, they didn't bother trying. But from that NEB hearing, remember they created that ministerial committee. Remember they hired Stephen Kelly, who was an economist, that created 20% of Kinder Morgan's submissions to the National Energy Board, then was hired to work on that ministerial committee. And then they hired, I didn't bash her too much, but it was Kim Baird worked for TMX. She's First Nations from Tuasim, but they got her on the committee. And that's how it is. So when we look at court, and when we went to the Federal Court of Appeal the first time, we're like, who's on there? And we looked at them and seen, okay, we might have a chance. But this time around, we said, who's on there? Look at them. Or even look at Fitzpatrick or Gerald, or when you look at her, just simple Google of how she's a litigating lawyer for banks. And so we looked at all those things. We're saying, what are we going to do here, and how far can we go? What could we push? What kind of political power? What can we influence? And how loud can we get? And that helped, because at the same time when we're going to the first court, it helped so much because we put so much pressure on British Columbia that BC came out and said, we're going to do everything in our toolbox to do what we could do to stop it. Remember that? But that wasn't them. That was all of you and the people power to influence that. And you mentioned Gujal a couple times, and sort of like Jewel James. Jewel James in the Lummi Nation is like, burn it down. It's like, burn what? Put a boat there and we'll burn it down. It's like, yeah. But he's awesome, but he brings attention to it. And hand in hand in our court processing and the work that we did, it was simultaneously. Whether it was putting on the concerts or doing a tour to the Alberta tar sands or putting on rallies and town hall meetings, that was all part of to feed into that court to create that influence. Because I think we had enough to get the right people in there to make the right decision. And then Jody was in there too. I think that helped a bit. But when they're gone and that switched, then you seen who they put in there as those Federal Court of Appeal judges, and we saw the writing on the wall. They straight out said that. You know, we look at the law with our lawyers and say, this is what it's supposed to be and why we're presenting this. But this is the likely possibility because of who's behind that bench, which is bullshit. So I hear all that, and it's just, that's the thoughts that came up for me, and but I want to talk about art, and this is like in times like this, all my teachers. I pray all over the world. When I went to Brazil, the climate conference, I went and prayed to the indigenous. It was cool. I love that. So in Paris even, found indigenous. Pray to them. Clan systems. Everywhere. Thailand, everywhere. Southeast Asia, and Panama, Brazil, Peru, all through the States. And when we met, because like Gujal, there's Ninawa, Chief Ninawa is chief of 17 nations in Peru, and they're going to kill him and his family, his wife and his 5-month-old baby, for standing up, just standing up. But he did a ceremony, and the words Haidagwai popped in his head. So he ended up at my house for a ceremony, and he goes, "Yeah, we need to bring my family to Haidagwai. I don't know where it is or what it is, but that's what we're going to do." And I called Gujal and I said, "Hey, come to this ceremony." So he explained that again. He goes, "I don't know what Haidagwai is," and he goes, "Well, I know what Haidagwai is because I'm the chief of Haidagwai." But they adopted him. He talked to all his matriarchs and chiefs, and they adopted him. But when we pray with them, they have nothing. I've been down there in the deep in the jungle. And they were going to cook a meal with a fire. And the guy went up with a machete to get some wood, and all forest everywhere. He wouldn't even cut down a tree. He walked in the woods for 2 hours and pulled back a tree that fell over. I was like, oh, geez, look at I drive my car and all this stuff. And look at these guys. They're just, and then they fight for it and they die for it. And they're, before, was it President Lula, right? Before he got in, you seen what they're doing. That they were killing them, and it was devastating. But but what I did see in their connection that they did have, and this is how I'm going to relate it to art. There's a sequence, there's a rhythm, and there's a vibration. And in our ceremonies, in all their ceremonies too. The sequence is the repetitiveness of our ceremonies, the vibrations, the songs. And the rhythm is both. In our ceremonies, and everyone wears red. But we set up everything the way it has been for a long time. We have the fire the way it is, the sweat lodges the way they are, the teepees the way they are, the arbor the way it is, all to feed into something. And it starts with appreciation. One of the local writers, I remember, wrote a book, and he talked about how the evolution of the world changed from just greenery. Just green. Everywhere, just green. Didn't need nothing more. The ecosystem's working. Didn't need nothing more than the green. Then a flower pops out. Why? Over the whole world, just a flower comes out of nowhere, pops up. For us to appreciate that beauty, right? To appreciate it. And then somebody comes along and says, hey, I'm going to appreciate that beauty, and I want it more than a memory that I could see. When it's not springtime and you got snow there, I want to see that flower. But it's that spirit of that. You think of that guy cutting that tree down, not wanting to cut the tree down, but finding one that fell over to appreciate that connection and to create something out of it. And that's what we do with all of our things. And it looks at the vibration of spirit. I think in how things I'll explain this too, how things come together. And all those ceremonies have been around the world, and it wasn't just in the jungles and different places in the outback in Australia. It was Catholics and Muslims and Buddhists and Christians. Actually, I did a sweat lodge with 12 priests 2 weeks ago, and they want to help us start a spiritual movement, a religious movement against TMX. And I said, yeah. And I went to their church and I prayed to them. Then they came to my lodge and we prayed, all 12 of them, and all different denominations and different things, but that's what we want to do. But they do the same thing. You take any two things, this fire, earth, water, and sky, that's any ceremony has, and the sage or whatever you have, it represents earth, and then the fire is the energy, the sun. You light it, and what happens is the spirit comes out of it with intention. With intention. And you guys all know that because you love somebody, two people come together with intention to create love. That's a spirit too. So, with art, with my drums, I was thinking, I'm not too artistic, but I am. With my drums, I made, one night, I made like 8 in a row. I just started and they're all there and I just didn't stop. I didn't stop. And my son came out and he goes, Dad, were you in your zone? And I was like, what do you mean? He goes, well, when I play music and he DJs, it seems like it'd be 20 minutes and next thing you know, 4 hours passed. And he goes, because you've been there a long time. And I went, yeah, I was. And when we create that art, there's going back to that first flower, to look at it and to appreciate it. It's the same with this. Stacy helps me, and he makes drums too now, beautiful drums. But this is an elk hide. I took the piece of wood and I cut it into 16 pieces and I rounded it off. I sanded it. The whole process I like. There's some things I like more, like making the drum. Sanding could get a little bit hard and repetitive, but it's still in my zone. And I create something that helps with the rhythm. It helps with the sequence of what I'm talking about, and it helps with the vibration. But also, and we did, in all the work that we've been doing, it helps in our fight. It does. Because when we told our stories in every court setting, we said, well, this is our culture. We're going to make this a holy place. I said, we're going to come in before we start court and we're going to bless it. We're going to bless it and make it a holy place. Even though symbols are like art. The things that we put up on the walls are symbols of that sequence and rhythm and vibration. And you see that in here. You do. You see it in the work that you did and creating life to something. And it has a message, like all the things that you said. When you're speaking, this is what I thought of. All those things that you said, that's what I thought of. But that's what they're doing. When I was down with those guys in South America, the regalia is similar to ours. They have something on their wrists to help them to what they touch, and they made it beautiful. They have something on their ankles to watch where they step, and they have something on their head. Some have we have a bonnet or a crown, or they have something, but that's to help you with your spiritual pressure from your head to send your prayers out in a good way. But they made them beautiful. Their headdresses were like 2 feet long with these long, beautiful feathers and red and black, and they're all in sequence and rhythm and vibration. And when Phil Lane and I dance with them, there's 1,000 of them behind us dancing. And it was beautiful. It was beautiful. That was art. And they showed their art with their drums and with their rattles and with their regalia. And that was the spirit that showed them to continue to have that connection to fire, earth, and water, and sky. And even though they're going to kill his baby and his wife and himself, that they made a family decision to say, nope, doesn't matter, we're going to fight for it. And that's what I believe. That's what this helps. And that's how art helps. Haich thank you.
Well, this may seem like a bit of an anticlimax now, but I thank you very much to everybody who spoke. I think that was illuminating from many different sides. And this TMX struggle, it's amazing the different elements that it pulls together. And it really involves a whole way of life. And the whole way of life that's predicated on oil and capitalism and growing inequality goes back to an original colonialism, a continuing colonialism, and we have to do what we can about this. Would anybody like to say something? Yes, go ahead, sir.
There's been 41 or 40, about 40 complaints to have the Judge Fitzpatrick removed from the bench. There must be, this is what I think is probably the only avenue in which the public can put the judges on trial. So I encourage everyone to file a complaint. My understanding is that Judge Fitzpatrick said that there's no proof that there's any children in the 215. So I consider that a racist statement, and I think that should be dealt with by the public and be removed because of that. It's just a rumor.
Okay, I'll stand over here. I don't want to stand in front of them. Yes, anyone else like to make a remark?
I'll
Yeah.
say something. I was arrested with my friend Lucy. We were the ones in the dinosaur suits. It was pretty awesome. And I just want to say thank you. I remember I was getting handcuffed and arrested and taken away by the police officer. And the police officer turned to my suit and he's like, "How did those things inflate?" And I was like, "With a fan and battery." And then he was like, "Okay." And then I asked him, like, "What do you think of the pipeline?" And he was like, "I try not to think about these things." And I was like, "Okay." He's like, "Yeah, I just do my job and then I go home and thank you. I go home and I do my job and I try not to think too much about these issues." And I'm like, that must be nice. It's it's really nice having to not think about these issues. But really the only thing I wanted to say was that when I was in the back of the van and my hands were cuffed and I was being taken away, I was laughing. I was feeling the happiest that I had felt in months, simply because I had taken action. And I think like talk is really important and discussion is really important and art is really important. But the most important thing we can do is take action, think how are we going to stop this, and do everything in our power to stop it, because that is when the fun and the magic really happens and we can truly make an impact.
Someone right here.
I don't really like using microphones. I don't really like using technology. I don't even really like talking. I'm a singer and a dancer, and if I had it my way, it'd be the only way I communicate. But people think it's a spectacle, they think it's something that you do, so that people will look at you. But, you know, when I was at the creek, I did my best to be discreet, but they came running after me because they could hear my drum beat, and I tried to look after every person around me, but they hunted me down, and when they came for me, no one was around. And this is what I wonder. When they took me, no one saw, and I was left in the back of a paddy wagon, locked and bleeding and all, my shoulders out the joints for 6 hours. Left in solitary confinement. Listen to my voice echoing off the walls, and I wonder where all the people are hearing our calls. You know, they talk about the creek, how beautiful. And I really mean that. I would die for every one of you. But I wonder who would do that for me. And this is what I think we really fear for. And what we really cling and look for and are held dear for is our ability to care for one another, for our sisters, our brothers, our aunties, our uncles, our two-spirited. I say and I speak, and I allow myself to be visible and I allow myself to be seen, because I have seen things in the street, and at least, like you said, at least when I was at the creek, I was being beat down for a reason. I think about it all too, though, before I went to the creek, and how when I sang in the street, people throw money at my feet. When I was out there, I was a criminal. Not just by the police, but by those who thought we should be a work camp, by those who thought we should be this way or that way. But there's something powerful in the ceremony and recognizing who really is with us, and in that clarity, gathering together and singing our songs, being fearless and not needing to just speak it. Because when I was in front of the court, I asked them, I said, I wasn't obstructing anything. Every single time I was arrested, they corralled me and they threw me to the ground and they left me worse off. Unable to walk, unable to speak, I was concussed. But no one knows. Where are all these stories? We all want to pretend like it's going to be an easy arrest, and maybe for some of us it is. And for that, we're blessed. But the mercy, I remember thanking them for giving me water. Why am I thanking someone for a basic human right? But that's what our society has come to. We thank people for being polite. We thank people. That's not true respect. We really need to care for each other, but we come from these disorderly families where maybe even our parents didn't treat us with kindness. But I just want to thank you all for showing your art, for showing your face, for gathering, and I hope that when you leave these places, that you won't just be an anonymous face to each other, that you legitimately care for each other, that you show up, that you share meal together, and that you don't just think about the human relations, think about all the peoples. The human peoples are just one of our peoples on this place. And I know when we stop treating each other like a spectacle, that we're just something to listen to whenever we have one of these, that our voices are so powerful. I will sit and gather with you and I will listen for hours if you let me. But will you do that for someone else? Will you do that as you have here for me? Not because we have something official, not because other people are watching you, but you're watching you. So I hope when you leave here, as you said, you know, it takes a lot to walk gently on the ground. When I was at the creek, I saw people hacking through with machetes so they could get to waterfall and save the forest. I saw people wearing military boots when I walked barefoot, even in the wintertime, so I could walk gently. We have to change the way that we walk through the world so we may walk gently. We have to be careful where our hands go, what our voices do. And we can live our life in a song. So when I looked at the judge, I said, I don't need a lawyer, I need a poet. I need someone that can translate me, translate my heart. And when I asked them, and they were looking at me and saying, these are the things you did, I asked, did you even look at my case file? And they answered no. Where are my body cams? How do I get that? When will I get my bail money? My charges have been dropped. But none of these people can help us because there's so much bureaucracy. So what I would really like to see is the people going to individual people and making relationships. And not just making, but creating. Because there's nothing that we need to restore other than our relationships. That's what will protect the forest. Is moving out of the spectacle and stepping into the full-bodied ceremony, which is every single one of your breaths. You are all incredibly sacred, and I'm really sorry to hear that this person's going to die, but as you said, this is history. But it needs to end, and it's urgent, because it will claim all of us. And I just thank you all. I'm a passionate person. I thank you all so much.
I got the honor of being tackled first because I did
Yeah. So this is my niece, and I was attacked first by the cops. And we spent 7 hours together in a paddy wagon, and all we did was sing. We sang until they released us. I refused to give them my name, my number, and all that stuff. So that when it finally came to court, they didn't even know who I was. So I got charged, but yeah, whatever. But yeah, thank you for sharing from your heart. We'd like to sing a song. Yeah, if you guys don't mind, without a microphone, we'd like to sing a song. Are you okay with that, Rueben? Of course. Oh, and by the way, this was made for myself, and my Rita Wong received one as well at the creek, Fairy Creek. And after he gifted this, somebody please, thank you. Then he said we were married.
You just can't win.
Dear relative, Chilton, I'd like to share a song with you before you get back and sing whatever it is. Guys would like?
Yeah, we visited Will in jail today. His lawyer's going to try to get him out on a hearing in the next few days. Appeal his sentence at the Supreme Court of Canada. We don't know how that's going to go, so he wants everybody to know that his spirit is strong. And please do, please do keep an eye. Thank you.